The door opened, Shostakovich came. It was an incredible impression. When Shostakovich arrived somewhere, this I experienced later quite a couple of times. Everything was absolutely silent. Miracle, a miracle.
Maestro Sanderling, it's a pleasure to meet with you here in Vienna. Thank you so much for joining me. For my generation, the name of Dmitri Shostakovich is basically represented in his great music and in the history books, but you knew him closely and personally. What was your first memory of meeting him?
I was quite a small child because my childhood was in Leningrad, fortunately now St. Petersburg, and that was the home city of Shostakovich. And he came quite regularly to the concert, and since the Fifth Symphony, I think most of the premieres, including even the number 12, been done by Mravinsky. So that was the beginning, and then something became professionally later.
So then with Shostakovich, what was your first project with him?
Actually, it's a little bit of a story. Shostakovich was, coincidentally, I guess, in my debut in Moscow. It was a concert on invitation by Svetlanov, after I won a competition in East Germany. Interestingly, this was a absolutely German program. There was nothing of Shostakovich. I mention it because Shostakovich visited even concerts with pieces, with works he liked or loved, and not necessarily only concerts with his own music. It was a lucky concert, and what I remember that the musician told me, you know, Shostakovich is on the way to you. It was in the intermission. They just said it, the door opened, Shostakovich came. It was an incredible impression. When Shostakovich arrived somewhere, this I experienced later quite a couple of times. Everything was absolutely silent. Miracle, a miracle. And after the concert, he invited me the next day to come to his home. I could not do because I had to rush to the train to St. Petersburg, to Leningrad for the rehearsal with the Philharmonics. But fortunately, I could do it on my way back to Berlin, to East Berlin, and that been for the rest of my life most incredible hours to be in his apartment. After several hours, I felt that I need to make an attempt to say bye-bye or to leave because he will not push me out or something. And I said, I have to go. He said, just a moment. He went out and came back very quick with the 2 scores, which been not published yet officially, but been copies. And in both copies been written very nice words towards me. And because it was very clear that he done it before, because it was so quick. And you cannot imagine what I felt. And then I I'd ask him, Dmitry Dmitrievich, may I perform it? And he said, that's the reason I gave it to you for the German premiere. the score's been 13th and 14th Symphony, but because of political problems, we could do the 14th first. And he continued on the project. The next surprise was, after a concert with the Staatskapelle Dresden, Dresdner Staatskapelle, I went to him in Gorisch. Gorisch is a wonderful place, Sächsische Schweiz, Saxonian Switzerland. And we already planned the 14, and I wanted to know his opinion about the soloist. I said, no. Please, German soloist, language of the audience. And that was a beginning of a very big, huge work. Then he heard our premiere. In the 14th Symphony, maybe I can mention the last two movements is Rilke. And there was no text versions, original in German. And in one bar, we missed some notes because there is no, in Russian language, what he composed, or in most of other languages are not articles, they're didas. And I talked with him about it. He recomposed this bar for me. So and the next one, as I heard it from the other people, he was so satisfied and with our number 14 that he asked me to do the same with a German text version, with a 13, with the Babi Yar Symphony. And we happily cheated a little bit on the authorities because Yevtushenko, the poet, was in trouble with the state leaders and he had to change some texts. But we made a German version with the first text and I'm still so happy about it. It was also almost with him. He sent with his son Maxim the Michelangelo seed, the score to me also. Maxim, it was just he died. Maxim brought the score that the father sends you greetings and he would wish that you do the Michelangelo seed also in the German version. We've done it. It is still by Eterna. No, it's now Berlin Classics or so.
If many of his colleagues described that he was a man of very few words, how much did he explain to you about his pieces and how to play them and the meaning of them?
It's a good question, a very good one. That is true. He was a man of very few words. I think there are two reasons. The main reason, he always said that he wanted performance. Performers, to whom he trusted that they understand him, and he does not need to explain anything. On the other hand, who cannot feel and understand it, there's no sense to explain them something. That was the one side. The other side, I think, that because of his terrible life, especially after Stalin's visit of Lady Macbeth, he never spoke about the content or the, the messages or of his music. And I think it has to do with his life because with the Fifth Symphony, he started to lie about his music. And I'm very much in favor of this. So it was possible to say the truth in the music, and it was not possible to say it in poetry, in film, in visual art, but in music. Now, there are several examples. The end of the Fifth Symphony is la 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 la, me, not you. And he said that he wrote that he understood criticism and he learned out of it. It's nonsense. It was absolutely right. Actually, I know one exception, which the Russian audiences or competent audiences and listeners of Shostakovich don't understand. It is the quotation of Rossini's Wilhelm Tell in the 15th Symphony. He told also, yeah, and it is something, in the toy shop or something. Wilhelm Tell of Schiller is about freedom. And that's what it was. I mean, everybody understood then Walküre and Tristan at the end, but in Russia, everybody wondered why Rossini Wilhelm Tell.
What did you learn from Shostakovich in terms of character and life and resilience? Of course, he didn't have any choice with what he went through, but my generation regards him as an example of strength.
He was not only a genius, which most of the people, or most of the cultured people understand nowadays, but he was also an outstanding humanist. And to save any chance or possibility to save or help people, he found it extremely important, and he done it not statements or to say something publicly, no, to help people, to save. I mean, I think hard a normal person in West would not understand what it meant to write to letter to Beria, that he thinks that the arrest and accusation of Weinberg is a misunderstanding. It was an incredible heroic, yeah. The value of humanism, human supporting each other, I mean, spiritually, so was a high tradition there, especially in St. Petersburg. So it stayed with me. Lenny Bernstein also had it, but his parents are coming from Russia. And I think that is also the line. Actually, this humanism and messages, humanism of the Inhalt, the substance, is very much culture of tradition of Russian literature, to express humanity. And Shostakovich, that was also a little bit the influence to Shostakovich. And that's why actually one of his icons, his icons been Haydn, Beethoven, Mahler. That's why Mahler was so important for him.
In his music, and especially in some of his earlier photos, we can sense that Shostakovich also had a great sense of humor. In your time of knowing him, did you also encounter or sense this?
I did. But when you speak about his young pieces, I mean, talking about the North, we just did the Anthrax, first piano concerto. His humor is also Shostakovich humor, but not very funny. Actually, sometimes more irony, to be ironic about somebody he hated. Yeah, he could say something about somebody, just like something very, very short, something very funny about somebody which was actually destroying.
Out of all of the musicians who had an influence on you, is there one in particular who really taught you to really listen to yourself or to open up a spiritual door for your musicianship and in life?
I can recognize it only by examples. I think that Furtwängler's Tristan is unsurpassed, because I mention it because I never heard Furtwängler live. I think that Klemperer's Mahler 9 is most Mahlerian Mahler 9, even if you have a little bit of feeling one rehearsal more would be helpful. Fidelio by Klemperer, I remember very well. When I approach a score, and do it for myself, or I'm in the front of the orchestra, I have to forget all the influences. That is the right way. Not to think how was it with him or there, or to copy. That's a very dangerous thing, because those examples are very, very personal. Furtwängler's Tristan, or Furtwängler's Manfred Ouverture Schumann. It's incredible. And I think even more that if somebody, of course, we're talking about somebody talented or very talented, start to copy, it can be, to be mildly speaking, strange. There's one great artist that tried to do it at the beginning. I will not mention a name, and it was wrong.
At what point did you feel like you could identify in yourself your own style and your confidence that you could share this in front of an orchestra?
Furtwängler said that the composer goes from ideas to the result, and the performer has to try from the result to discover the beginnings, the initial ideas. And I think it's absolutely right. And I think, I said also in the master classes, look, you don't have to look for their own style. You look for the work, look with a deep approach. You have not to be worried that you lost your own view, because it will be inevitable that with understanding work and composer and the culture, that the inevitable also you will be in.
Speaking of conductors who had a recognizable style in their recordings and in person, how did you first meet Leonard Bernstein?
I think it happened actually after my recording of the Michelangelo Suite in the German language. And I think he was not familiar with the piece. Somebody gave it to him. And then, I don't know, was it in Vienna or in Berlin that somebody introduced me to Lenny? We are now sitting in the Musikverein. So, with your question, I remember I was assisting him in his recording project of the Schumann No. 2 with Vienna Philharmonic. And I must say that I think he did a wonderful Schumann 2. Maybe even I didn't expect it. It was outstanding. It was a hot day, and he told there had been two assistants. I forgot who was the other one. And let's go a little bit to walk. Lenny knew Vienna like no Viennese. He visited all the 20 or more Beethoven places, not only the accessible, but he knew, and he was leading us. And all of a sudden, he says, Schumann Adagio of the No. 2 is like the poem by Heine, so and so, and start to tell it in German. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Lenny knew about, I know, everything of architecture, every plan. He could tell you something about the Japanese painting of 18th century or aquarelle or so. Incredible.
I have the impression that Leonard Bernstein was incredibly warm and supportive towards young musicians, and they could actually also be friends with him. What was your experience of being around him?
That was my experience, yeah. I don't know whether it was with everybody, but that was my experience. He also told to somebody, I heard it later, why I never visited his, where he was in South Florida, Key West, but what Lenny could say about anything and everything, and about music as composer, of course, it was most important.
And how do you contrast the influence on your development from someone so completely different in personality and artistic soul as Herbert von Karajan? When was your first meeting with Karajan?
Funny enough, also with this with this CD, and it was Berlin, and then I also became assistant of Karajan on few projects. I think this complete opposite. Karajan was incredible to learn how to get a result, and I think I never met a conductor who was able to get so high percentage of his sound or idea from an orchestra. How to work with the orchestra, it was incredibly beneficial to learn from him. The only thing which I didn't understand from the very beginning, that was the way to work with Berlin Philharmonic, with Vienna Philharmonic, with Dresdner Staatskapelle. And he told to us, I remember after rehearsal, I think it was Shostakovich 10, he told, it was a surprise for us, what can I do when I go for 3 weeks to Chicago? He said, no. At Berlin Philharmonic, I'm more than 20 years together and so. For instance, it was so, I must say, so super professional. His idea, and I think that's absolutely right idea, the beginning with a new piece for the orchestra is to build up the piece, to build up the construction. So here, he would say in the first, from here to here we have to listen to them, from here to here we have to listen to them, and so he wanted to establish in an orchestra the highest possible knowledge of the score and understanding of the piece.
He seemed like an incredibly serious person in the photos I've seen, in the rehearsal videos, and in the biographies that I've read. Was this also your experience?
That was actually my experience, and I must say, I think the unsurpassed Heldenreim I heard from him, that some unsurpassed Bruckner I heard from him. I think that was really it was the Bruckner, yeah, and that very beautiful Lohengrin, but also a very good Figaro in Salzburg. So great memories.
When you wake up in the morning, what keeps you hopeful about the future?
I would like to hope that our world is not going towards apocalypse. I mean that our world will not be disturbed from mass destruction, from nuclear weapons, which is possible now. It's new. It's new, I mean, since the late 40s. That would be my hope, hoping that this would not appear.
Mr. Sanderling, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you about your musical life, your influences, your impressions about a truly rich musical life. I thank you so much for your time and for being with me here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.